Hello, I'm Toussaint Morrison and welcome back to the Social Science Club. That was a very aggressive hello. I don't know why I went that hard on the hello. But thank you so much for tuning in today. And I can't thank y'all enough. If you find this video of value, click like. If you want to get more videos like this, hit subscribe. You'll get notifications right away. And then also, if you think this video is useful for other people, just hit the share button. Or hit the share. There's not a share button. Just share it with them. Copy the link. Whew, words today. Okay, let's jump right into it. So I put out a short video that spoke about 2022 being the most deadly year for police brutality on record. And I believe it was 1,176 people were killed by police in the year of 2022, which is 3.2 killings per day. Just a real quick this research study found that most people that are killed with other people watching are young black men, and most people that are killed with nobody watching are people suffering from mental health crises. So that just gives you the scope of what's going on. And before I jump into this, I understand that there's a knee-jerk reaction to really write off the information as anti-cop or just like abolitionist or anything like that. I am still evolving my idea of law enforcement, regardless of what you may think, because a lot of this channel revolves around capital punishment, state-sanctioned violence, and equity. And so I think that anybody can receive this message and want better for their community. That's it. I think we all start at a level of wanting better for our community, for our families, and for ourselves. And when you see the staggering statistics that that police have killed more people in 2022 than any other year, the argument could be made that it's obviously getting worse. And that is my opinion, and my view on it is that it's getting a lot worse before it is getting any somewhat better. And a large question that a lot of people have to ask is the law enforcement that we have right now. If you look at different countries, law enforcement in different countries comes from a certain origin. When we look at Japan, you can go as far back as the shogunate, where law enforcement comes from there. You look at France, you look at Germany. Everybody's law enforcement has a different origin, and the way that they're equipped or militarized is very different. The police in the United States are the most deadly law enforcement in the world. I think Brazil might have us beat. I'll have to research that, but we're one of the leaders in capital punishment and state-sanctioned violence in the world. And so with that being said, it is incumbent upon, I believe, everybody to take a long look at what is exactly happening and not be so quick to exonerate the killings and murders of people by police. A lot of times, especially with Keenan Anderson, the immediate reaction was to, well, what was he doing? What did he have in his body? Why was he acting like that? Why didn't he call some? And it's all these just checklists of victim blaming. It just goes down the line of what he could have done to prevent his own murder. And that checklist of victim blaming, it leaves no room for a conversation about what the hell was that police officer doing? What were they thinking? Why is their knee-jerk reaction? Why is their response to go to tase somebody 6 times within 42 seconds, I believe? And we have to question the people doling out the violence. And if we're not doing that, then we're not having a conversation about building or evolving what our communities can look like down the line. And so when I read the statistics, there's several things that happen. And on Instagram, it's just a boom, flat in your face. Here's the numbers. And then people comment underneath, and you either agree or you disagree, and it goes and it devolves, like many comment sections, into name calling, victim blaming, blah, 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 blah. All that being said. And so what I wanted to take from those numbers was let's try and understand what exactly do those numbers mean. And in a Harvard study, they found that black people are 3.5 more times likely to be killed than white people. This happens more times in bigger cities, such as Chicago. Black people are they have a 650% higher chance of being killed by police than white people. And when you grapple with that, you have to go back to the legacy of the town of Chicago, the city of Chicago, and the segregation that took place, and the redlining that took place, and the black codes that took place. And we don't need to go into a whole history lesson here, but that number is what it is because of the way Chicago has been over time. Law enforcement in Chicago has historically predated upon black men more than any other demographic in the city. So it should be no wonder when that happens. Now, the question is, how do you change that? And there are some solutions I can offer you right now that you can hopefully look into. And I believe in Cleveland they had issue 11, I think it was, where they created an oversight committee where it's X amount of community members, no cops allowed, and X amount of those community members in the board have to have had some history of experience with police brutality, lost a loved one to police brutality. And once that committee meets, then they can discipline a cop once they get a complaint, or they can recommend something for the cop once they get a complaint about said cop, and move on from there. And so you have an outside eye, an outside body, a body outside of the law, like the law enforcement department, critiquing said law enforcement department. So once that happened, the chief of police of Cleveland was like, bye, I'm out of here. And that's due in large part, I'm just mixing those words up. That is largely due to the fact that he has worked a certain way for his entire career, and now you get this new policy down the line. Well, I'm not trying to be beheld to like the people that pay my salary. So I find it extremely backwards for police to not feel that they're here to serve the people. And it's just, it seems a little bit wild to me that that's something that can make a police chief just quit his job. So when you have an oversight committee that is made up of civilians, and some of those civilians have experienced police brutality, now you have an eye watching over the police department, we could say to punish it or to reprimand it, but to hold it to a higher standard. That is it. When integrity is doing the right thing when nobody's watching, or if somebody is watching, we know that many police departments, if not all, have little to no integrity. And this is just, this psychologically, this is just the way this works. If somebody isn't watching you, the Minneapolis Gang Task Force, they were put in place to bust up gangs and stop drug dealing, and they did, but when nobody was watching, they took all the drugs and started selling them themselves. So if you don't have integrity, then you don't have a high standard of a law enforcement department. That's just what it is. A plus B equals C. So you must, integrity, law enforcement department, higher standard, better service. I'm thinking of like Tires Plus, better service, better something, better the. But when you put those two together, when you have that policy change, then you can have a better department. Now, somebody who maybe an abolitionist or is just entirely, maybe of the notion that, all cops are bad cops, that's not good enough. And you have to get an entirely different new system. And that's where you could possibly do that with that policy change, getting a new safety commission, as some cities have called it. But then there's other cities like Compton, which they did away with their law enforcement department, but they replaced it with the sheriff's department. So the county officers were then policing Compton, and it didn't work out. They got the same thing. So those are two examples of reform. One is actually holding police to a higher standard, and the other is just replacing one with the other. It's the same thing. And we can go a step further and look at Minneapolis. Minneapolis, God, this is just so, it's disappointing is what it is. But Minneapolis, after the MPD murdered George Floyd, we discovered that the oversight committee was really toothless, didn't have a whole lot of weight or power to it, and essentially the mayor and the city council just droughted it, just starved it to death. So they need 9 members to hold a meeting, to hold a quorum, and they never hired anybody new, so there were only 3 members left. Six had already left it, so they couldn't hold a quorum, so they couldn't exist. So they've replaced it with something else. The issue is that they fast-tracked this police oversight committee, and what it is it has 2 officers, or I believe active officers, that are on the committee, and they can't make any suggestions or reprimands to the police chief. It's even worse than it was before. And what it is it's just pacifying a community into thinking that something is getting done when really nothing is getting done. So when we look at the most deadly year of police brutality in 2022, and then we look at policies that can hold police to a higher standard where killing somebody isn't the perceived necessary outcome to solve said scenario, you're going to have to look at policies that have worked for cities to hold police to a higher standard. And when I say higher standard, that just means to become a cop, you have to be better at what you're doing. It takes more time and hours to become a hairstylist in Minnesota to get a license to do hair than it does to become a cop. That is extremely problematic. And it's not a dig on hairstylists. It's just saying that the stakes are way higher for police. They're holding the livelihoods, lives, and emotional health and physical health of people in their hands. And that should come at a more rigorous orientation, time taken to become said officer, and something that people should be surveying a lot harder on who's going into law enforcement and staying there, and who should be put on desk work that has bodies on their record, such as Derek Chauvin and many other killer cops that are still on the force. The larger lesson here is from understanding that 2022 is the most deadly year for police brutality, is that I want to phrase this a certain way. The idea is that when we see the numbers and we look at what's happened, the question that you have to ask yourself on a hyperlocal level is, who is trying to pacify this situation? Who is benefiting from these numbers? Who is benefiting from pacifying us to thinking that everything is better, or it's getting better, or we're doing better, or city council is making things happen? And who's benefiting from that? Who's benefiting from things being stagnant or getting worse? Who's benefiting from the violence? And once you can start to explore those questions and gain some answers from that, then you can start to really engage with your community and figure out, oh, well, this makes total sense why this is happening. And somebody wrote in the comments, they said, when I made a post about Keenan Anderson, they said, well, I think we need to look at how many black people are committing crimes versus white people. And this is the reason why I do these videos, is because when we talk about crime, when we talk about the word criminal, just the language of it, what if you, just for a day, maybe even half a day, never said crime or criminal and replaced it with survivalists or survivalism? And when we look at what people are willing to do to put a roof over their head, put food in their mouth, and have water and have money, or to essentially give themselves the necessities, that's an act of survival. And when we start to condemn and brand people as just criminals, then we engage in a situation or conversation where there's no forgiveness, no grace, no space, no nothing. And we're looking at other humans as subhuman, which that conversation, in my opinion, cannot go anywhere. So when we break this down, when we talk about survivalism, when we talk about what policing is, and then how we're getting pacified into believing that it's getting better, who benefits from that? and who benefits from the violence. And if we look at people, and getting back to that comment, we need to look at black people, like how many crimes they've committed versus white people. It's the idea of like, that's not where the conversation starts. The conversation starts at, economically, where is that city at? Why is there a poor neighborhood and it's disproportionately filled with black people or people of color? Why is the employment rate for white people so much higher through the roof than it is for people of color in that city? You have to look at the makeup and the historical makeup of cities like Milwaukee, who had redlining, and people from a poor side of Milwaukee, mostly people of color, marched for nearly 200 some days to a higher property value part of Milwaukee and had bricks and rocks thrown at them, peaceful protests, and did that for over 200 days. You have to look into why that happened. And if those people are branded as criminals and they just want better for their neighborhood, then we have a big problem. We can't continue that conversation. We were looking at people that are fighting for just human decency. And so when we look at policymakers, lawmakers, city council, elected officials that are benefiting from law enforcement killing more people, that I think is where the conversation starts. And you can find out a lot about your city from there. So I wish you the best of luck on doing that. Whew, this was a long video. Thank you so much for tuning in. As I said in the beginning, if you liked it, click like. If you want to get more, hit subscribe. If you think somebody else will benefit from this video, share it. We'll see you in the next one.